I'm Michael, and welcome to Beyond the Screenplay, the podcast where each episode we do a conversational deep dive analysis into a film. Today, we are talking about The Wizard of Oz, the 1939 film written by Noel Langley, Florence Ryerson, and Edgar Allan Wolfe, based on the book The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum, and directed for the most part by Victor Fleming. I'm joined by the Beyond the Screenplay team, Trisha Rand.
Hello, everyone.
Brian Bittner.
Hello, hello.
And Alex Calleros.
Hi.
So we are kicking off our Wicked Winter season. We are talking about The Wizard of Oz. Also, right now, you can go over to the Beyond Screenplay Patreon and listen to our episode on Wicked. Tie-in, both of those, all in one day. How about that? And we're going to be talking about a lot of fun or not fun movies this season. We have Sicario next week, Challengers for Valentine's Day, Network, The Brutalist, Chicago, Anora. It's going to be quite a season. I'm looking forward to it. I haven't seen half of these movies, so it's going to be a fun ride. I like it. Also, as a quick update to viewers, LA has been on fire for a lot of the time this year, and we're all safe and we're all fine, but it's been a stressful period here, and that's also why we're a little delayed kicking this off. And if you don't live in LA, this doesn't affect you, but it's been a big enough deal that it felt like a thing that needed to be mentioned here. Several of us had to leave our houses. We slept at the houses of the other half of us. There's a lot going on, but we're safe. We're back at home and we're podcasting now. So we're very fortunate to be able to do that. If you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe. And I think it's time to talk about The Wizard of Oz. You guys want to talk about The Wizard of Oz?
Oh, yes.
Hell yeah.
Okay. So this is a movie that I think I've seen a lot. It's like one of those movies where how am I supposed to remember the first time I watched The Wizard of Oz? It's just like, it almost feels like you're born into this world with like the capacity for language and learning, and you have seen The Wizard of Oz.
100%. It's true. It's true.
But it was really interesting sitting down and watching it now, start to finish. And Trisha, at some point recently, you had mentioned that there's this whole opening to The Wizard of Oz where, Dorothy meets all the people on the farm that then go on, which when you mentioned that, I had totally forgotten. And so that would have been very strange for me watching it this time had you not primed me for that. Because it's a pretty, extensive sequence there that is set up that I feel like it just, gets not talked about at all. It's just such an interesting movie, like watching something that is a classic like this. There are things that really bump me. The Munchkins attacking is like, the way it's done is like, it's assaulting a little bit to my ears, and there's just a lot going on. But throughout the whole thing, it feels like this movie really knows what its story is about. And it is telling its story at every moment. The sets are incredible. Even today, I was like, how did they do this? And the costumes, all the stuff. It's also just so clear how many things have borrowed from it over the years. There's a part where I was like, am I watching Lord of the Rings? Like, this is
100%.
Right?
Gates of Mordor.
Yeah, Gates, exactly. Anyway, so there's just so much to talk about in this movie, but it was really interesting watching it now. I mostly enjoyed it. Some of it felt a little jarring, but overall, I just really appreciated this movie. So that's me. Trisha, tell me about The Wizard of Oz.
Sure. As with you, this has been a part of my DNA for as long as I can remember. It is a really picture perfect, clear textbook version of a hero's journey with the plot beats and where they fall. And they're really, really clear because they're all really literalized, in the thing. And I do want to say I was wrong on the Labyrinth episode. I bet that Dorothy got dropped into Oz at minute 30. It's actually minute 20. So there are 20 minutes of the movie before that. However, she doesn't set off on the yellow brick road to get to the wizard until minute 30 because she's just hanging out with munchkins for 10 minutes after she gets there.
Here's the next faction who's going to introduce themselves and then never show up again.
I was having labyrinth flashbacks during that sequence. Yeah.
I love the Munchkins.
I mean, I don't, yeah, that's fine.
Sure. It's a lengthy sequence. That's all I'm going to say about that. But she actually sets off on her quest to like follow the yellow brick road. That's like minute 30. And then she like goes off to see the wizard. So it's, anyway, I used to use this movie when I would like lecture with like screenwriting 101 kind of stuff, where it's like, if you're looking for the plot beats, you can look at them in The Wizard of Oz. They're super clear. Here's the inciting incident. Here's the break into two. Here's the midpoint. Here's the everything. Here's a crisis, like blah, blah, blah. And it's all super clear and really literalized in the text. And I still really appreciate that about it. And the themes are there as well. I mean, they're not complicated themes. There's no place like home. That's it. That's really it. Yeah. That's the whole theme. But it's a lesson Dorothy has to learn. She does not appreciate being on the farm or being at home at the beginning of the movie. And then she spends the whole movie trying to get back there. And she's so thankful to be back there at the end. And she's been taught to appreciate what she has. That's what it is. And it's wonderful. You know, it's this sort of fable, like you could read a lot of it on this allegorical level. There's all these iconic symbols. The filmmaking was so cutting edge and interesting at the time. And like the songs are still really catchy. Like I showed this movie to my 3-year-old expecting, he's almost 4, but expecting pretty much he would tune out and not be interested in it at all. Admittedly, he's never seen a live action movie before. So it was hard for me to be like, this is not what they look like, by the way. And then I did also show him a good chunk of Wicked, and he was like, Mom, why does it look like this? And I was like, oh, sir, I have so much to talk to you about.
Those do feel like gateways into live action, though.
Yeah, it's like transitional between cartoons and live action.
Right. But he was riveted for like most of the runtime of the movie. He was interested in the Scarecrow and all the supporting characters and in the wizard and it's all really fantastical in a way that like it's a 20th century fairy tale. And it's an American fairy tale. And it feels really interesting for that reason and still feels like a pillar of what it is to be a good story in a classic movie. Mm-hmm. Like there's just no denying The Wizard of Oz, no matter how old it gets. And I just appreciate it so much.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Brian, what about you?
I mean, yeah, it's so funny because I had this in my notes and you guys both said the same thing, which was just like, I feel like this movie has always been there. Like, I can't remember the first time I've seen it. I can't remember the last time I saw it up until now. I can't remember any single time watching this movie. And yet I feel like I've seen it 20 or 30 times, right? Like, it's just like, that's what it is. And I think that's partially because I have seen it a lot, partially because it's so ubiquitous. So you've just seen scenes all your life, whether it's on TV or whether it's being referenced or whether, you know, in the later days online or something. But then also it's so memorable. You know, it's just so like every character and every sequence just feels like it is doing something that is just imprinting itself in your brain in a lot of ways that there are movies where you're like, oh man, I saw that movie once in the theater 15 years ago, but like I remember that sequence so well. It just feels like Wizard of Oz is just a series of that, right? With some exceptions. There were definitely like the whole Munchkin thing where I was like, did I die? And like, this is in this movie? And a couple little moments like that along the way where I was like, how do I remember this movie so well? And I don't remember this at all. Some of those, I think there's a reason we don't remember them as well because they're not as well loved and therefore they're not as repeated or copied, you know. So those can be a little off-putting, a little much, a little weird. Obviously, like any movie that's almost 100 years old, there are going to be those things that feel a little like, oh, okay, that's a little, that acting's pretty hammy or that line is like, you know, a little goofy or whatever. But then ultimately it's like by that last 10 minutes, I'm just like, hell yeah. Like it's just like you can't not love just kind of the book ending of this movie, kind of where it starts, not just just not just the Kansas sequences, but just kind of the whole way into Oz, the black and white into color. I never appreciated before that they had to like have everything painted, you know, in monochrome, have Judy Garland's stunt double in a gray dress to open the door, kind of go out of frame so Judy Garland could walk in. I was just like, that's incredible. Like, I literally stopped the movie to be like, how did they do this? It's like watching Chaplin or Keaton, where you're like, this was 80, 90 years ago, and I'm stunned by the fact that they pulled this off. Just a joy of a movie, and it's hard. It's just hard not to love and hard not to like. What did you just say, Trisha? You said like there's no denying it, I think, and it's just like, yeah, that's how I feel when I watch this movie. Like, yep, no denying.
Yeah. Alex, what about you?
Yeah, I was thinking about watching this movie about its ubiquity in American culture and across generations. You know, my grandma recently passed away, and I was thinking about her and then my mom and then me, and like multiple generations of families know this movie, partially because it was on TV all the time for like decades, but it's just everybody knows it. And there's other movies that are classics for one generation, and that's what they grew up on and they are obsessed with it and nobody else cares. I feel like every generation since it has come out grows up with this movie, and there's something kind of beautiful about that. Like there's like a lineage, like an American lineage there, of like this foundational movie that we've all seen. And then as you were saying, Michael, as I was watching it, I'm like, oh yeah, every director I've ever seen has seen this movie. Every new archetypal blockbuster first was inspired by this movie when they were kids, so like Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, all these new Wizard of Oz's are clearly building off of the Wizard of Oz. So it just feels like so foundational in this way that I didn't realize going back into it. I'm like, wow, this is kind of like the origin for so much of what then inspired us as kids, inspired, generations after us and before us and everything. And then on top of that, just being really impressed by, wow, this holds up in a lot of aspects. Like the tornado looks really good. How did they do that? The transition, you said, Brian, from sepia to color is like a great, beautiful, wonder feeling transition. Like the effort put in to actually like do the thing all the way with the technology they had is really impressive. And it doesn't feel cheap. It doesn't feel kind of half-assed. Like they really went for it. And then, yeah, just like there's also, we'll talk about this, next with Wicked, but just as with Wicked, there's something about the musical form and, that kind of cements it also in my childhood brain through today of just like, these songs, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, they're so iconic and they're so like in our DNA that when these songs come up or the melodies from the songs come up, they just there's something like almost DNA genetic about them now. Basically everything you guys said, and I'm just kind of wowed and kicking myself for not realizing, oh yeah, this movie is really important. I always kind of wrote it off as like, yeah, it's that movie I watched when I was a kid, and it's cute and it's fun, and there's lots of references to it, and people, pay homage to it, but it's like more important than I think I realized.
I will say, when Over the Rainbow started playing and my son was watching it with his eyes wide and just like so hooked into it, he loves musicals, but I was just like weeping because I was like, I get to share, right? The generational aspect of this movie. I felt so privileged to be able to share it with somebody, the like magic of it. And it feels like maybe the original like 4-quadrant movie, right? Where
100%.
So Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was 1937, which was right before this. And that was like sort of the first feature-length kids movie in a lot of ways, but this feels like it really is for like families, and not in like a short cartoon like Mickey Mouse, kind of like Steamboat Willie kind of thing, but in like here is a movie truly for everyone. And they were making musicals everywhere, but like musicals that were accessible to children, and not about like Broadway or stage or fame or like not these big elaborately staged things, but really just the simplicity of the way that this is presented. I don't know. It was really striking this time.
And there's also like the fact that this story has had the impact that it's had. We refer to this movie as like the original Wizard of Oz. It's like this was the 8th version of Wizard of Oz that was put on film in 1939, right? Yeah. And then of course it was so big that like for a few decades no one dared kind of tread on that. But then we had The Wiz, we had Return to Oz, we had the James Franco thing, we had Wicked. You know what I mean? It's just like it's like this movie obviously is the main reason why this world is still in our minds almost 100 years later. But even before this movie existed, there was like it was already capturing people's imaginations. Just L. Frank Baum's books and world and universe, I should say. I wonder like what the shared universe concept is if you go back in time, because there are these things as far back as Shakespeare and as far back as Greek tragedy, right? Where it's like this character shows up over here, but it's like L. Frank Baum created this land of Oz, and we just so happen to have one story that we really know, and then a lot of things are based around that story. But there was just a whole thing that he made that then it just captured people's imaginations in a big bad way.
Yeah,
I was thinking about that, of like the effort to keep like the flame alive with Wizard of Oz. Like you were saying, like there have been these entries over time. We still have the original, but new things come up that like cause us to like revisit it, and how that's kind of part of, I don't know, modern culture anyway. With, you know, I love that you called it accurately, Trisha, like an American fairy tale, and like retelling fairy tales and reimagining fairy tales. The core stays the same, but it's like reinvented for different times and stuff. And so I think that's another reason why this movie, as you were saying, Alex, is so important, is because it's almost like the simplicity of the foundation lets it then be like molded into whatever shape is going to fit the modern culture best at any given time.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I'm really excited to talk about tomorrow, but we also talk about it today, we're recording Wicked tomorrow, is just the fact that this movie positions Dorothy's Adventure in Oz pretty clearly as a dream and not as a real place, down to the fact that dreams usually remix people from your real life. And, there's a lot of dream logic that goes into the story in Oz. And yet, as we're talking about, there's kind of these spin-offs and expanded universe things happening with Wicked especially, that is treating Oz as a more complex place with politics, and it's got more of like a Hogwarts Harry Potter world vibe, which is not positioned as a like temporary dream place. And so that's just something that I was realizing while watching the original movie, is like, I would not actually think of this world as a world you can really build off of, because it seems like a subjective dream projection from a single girl's imagination. Mm-hmm. And yet we have Wicked, which is really going all in on building out a world.
Right. And that is unique to the movie, by the way. Like, that is not the story of the book, is not that it's in her mind.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
So we have this weird kind of Dr. Sleep thing going on, I think, with Wicked, where it's like, she's green, which is a thing the movie did, right. But it's also a real place, which is not a thing the movie did. And I think her sister in Wicked, her sister's slippers are silver, which is the color they are in the book, but not in the movie, so they're just kind of, which I think, I don't care about this franchise enough to care. Like, when they do it with Star Wars, we're like, wait, hold on. You can't do this thing from that thing that contradicts that thing from over there. That's our Bible, because we're nerds. But I feel like with something like Wicked, they're just kind of being like, here's the Wizard of Oz thing. We're going to kind of pick and choose things from that and use whatever makes sense for the story we're trying to tell, which I think is fine.
Yeah. And again, I think, you can easily look up volumes of information about the making of The Wizard of Oz. And we might touch on some of it here. There's so much out there. It's all really interesting. It's a really fascinating window into like old Hollywood times when people were just getting third-degree burns from pyrotechnics. And everyone was like, I guess we'll pause.
The lack of safety and like care for like human health on this set is out. It's crazy.
Yeah,
it's so upsetting. Sorry, I recently learned, I was reading up on James Cagney recently for unrelated reasons to this, but I recently learned that James Cagney, like, he was in a bunch of gangster movies, and sometimes they would shoot at him with live bullets they would just shoot at him with bullets. I mean, they were sharpshooters, so they were aiming not to hit him. But it was because blanks and squibs were expensive and real bullets were cheap. And so they would just...
But human life is expensive.
Yeah.
And actually,
Wild.
again, sidebar, but James Cagney was one of the founding members of SAG.
Mm.
And one thing SAG was like, hey, you have to stop shooting at us. Anyway.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, that's
good thing.
Anyway.
That's why the SAG badge is 3-inch thick metal.
Yeah. Well, but since we introduced them, I think it's worth saying, like, some of the things that are pretty well known from this production are, the paint they were putting on these characters' faces, lead paint, horrible chemicals seeping into their skin. The snow that falls on them in the poppy field is just asbestos.
Yeah.
So they're just being showered with asbestos.
Yeah. It's like,
To be fair, that's what living in LA has been like for the last 2 weeks.
oh, yeah, exactly right. But anyway, so all of the troubled production pieces of this aside, I do think there were, and it went through a really long creative development process as well. There were many different takes on the story. Again, it had already been adapted several times. And I just think it's really to the credit. I can't remember exactly which producer it was that came in, but he was pretty much like, no, we are going to simplify this. We are going to keep the magical elements. We're going to make it this dream state thing. And then build in these songs that are thematically united around this idea of wishing for things that you think you want, but then realizing actually you already have what it is that you think you want. So Over the Rainbow is Dorothy's version of that. Obviously with her friends, you get If I Only Had a Brain, If I Only Had a Heart, and If I Only Had the Nerve, or, the courage. And it's all really thematically cohesive for the most part in its musical numbers and ideas, but the structural scaffolding is thematic and built in to make it as clean and simple as possible. And I think that that's brilliant and what is needed here, and why I would venture to say this movie is so enduring, because it's so clean and so simple.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember reading that they were worried about the magic elements because they were like, modern audiences are too sophisticated for like magic.
Yeah.
Like, we can't do that. So, we'll make it a dream sequence. That's how they'll buy it. It's like,
Little did
same
they
conversations
know.
have been
Right.
happening forever. So I totally agree. And I'm glad that we're talking about like a few musicals this season, because I think that's one of the things that is great about musicals, as you were saying, like it signposts theme and structure and character arc in a really clear way when it's done well, because it's like, what's happening to the character? They're going to sing and tell me about it. Anytime they're singing and telling me about it, like, that's an important like character moment or thematic statement or whatever it is. And I think Wicked does this really, really well. I don't remember Chicago. It might not
Oh, I can't wait to
in
get into it.
quite as much, but okay, great.
It's there.
I remember loving it.
Oh, yeah.
Just the tango scene. It's 2 hours of the tango,
Yeah,
right?
you've got it.
Yeah. But yeah, like both kids movies, including in that, like, Pixar as well as the Disney classics, anything that like simplifies the structure are, as we've talked about, great things to look at, to learn, because it's there, it's on the surface, easy to follow. And as you're saying, I feel like it's undeniable that the thematic coherence and simplicity of The Wizard of Oz is what makes it so good and so moving. Like when like the Scarecrow's like, I'm afraid, or the Tin Man's like, I don't have a heart. Like, I'm like, I feel that's like an existential thing. It's so simple, but it's like, yeah, like that. Yeah. I'm a robot. I know everybody. I actually don't like the Tin Man that much. The Scarecrow is personally my favorite. Anyway, but it's very relatable and it's right there and it's clear. And so you immediately can key into it.
Yeah. Just wanted to say in that like lecture series that I did a few different times about like basic story structure. The other two examples I used were Beauty and the Beast, the animated musical from 1992. And the other one was The Matrix. And if you really want like the hero's journey with like the structural things like on the beats and everything's in the text and it's all incredibly clear and here's the hero and here's the whole thing, these three movies, you really can't beat them.
Going to the thematic coherence, in the songs, I feel like the only two songs where I really zone out are the ones that maybe start to feel superfluous. And so, yeah, we've already tipped our hats to the extended Munchkin sequence, where we do meet a lot of different factions of Munchkins, which are not really story relevant. And then later, the lion gets a second song. He gets the second song about being king of the jungle.
Right.
And everybody's like helping him out with that and giving him like a big, cape. And it feels like, why is this here? This doesn't feel right that the lion of all people is getting like a second number at this part of the story, right before meeting the wizard. I'd almost want like another Dorothy number there or something. It's interesting how the rest of the movie, it feels really well paced and I'm always in it. And I'm actually surprised by how not bored I am. And those are the two sequences where like I kind of get blurry. And I think it's because of the lack of that thematic, tightness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, with
one
the
of the
Munchkins,
few notes I had was also about there was the Munchkins and that lion sequence were the main two things that like bumped for me as well.
I think the Munchkin. So you said something about attacking earlier, Michael. Was that the sharpness, the pitch of the voices?
Yeah,
because they don't actually they're not violent.
No, they're not violent. That was me expressing how I felt. I was felt visually and orally assaulted.
Because I think there's a fondness of just like the childhood memories I have that like when I heard the Munchkin voices, I was like, oh my God, yeah, those guys. And like the ridiculousness of the voices and the singing. But yeah, Trisha, you were going to say something about the Munchkins.
Yeah, I was just going to say old movie's going to old movie. Like there are a couple of things in here where, you get everybody there, you build this incredibly elaborate set. And I cannot wait to talk about set design and production design when we talk about Wicked tomorrow also, because that is one of the most iconic things about this movie. And so you build this entire Munchkin Land set, which is incredibly expensive. It's incredibly cinematic, magical, like it's everything, right? And from a story point of view, you really only need to spend 5 minutes there. Really, you maybe only need to spend 2 minutes there, right? She's going to meet Glinda, and she's going to get the ruby slippers. And she does actually encounter the witch there, which I had forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
And
I forgot that she killed the witch's sister.
Well, I did remember that part, but I had forgotten that the witch appears in smoke and fire and disappears in an incredible, explosion of smoke and fire also that early in the movie. And my kid was like, what? Like, just...
Is there a musical about her?
Well, he already wants to be the Wicked Witch of the West for Halloween this year, so I'll keep you posted on if we all went up green and Wizard of Ozzy this year at Halloween. We might. But yeah, you really functionally don't need to spend much time in Munchkin Land. However, as has always been the case in Hollywood, you just want to showcase the things you spent a lot of time and money on. So you're just going to make it a larger part of the runtime of the movie. Now, there were also things that they spent a lot of time and money on that are not in the cut of this movie. There was a whole other big musical number where apparently the jitterbug number where everyone has to dance for a while. That apparently was another 5-minute sequence, and Dorothy dances and impresses, I don't remember who. I can't remember from what I read about it, but there were other things that were eliminated.
The whole scarecrow, Busby Berkeley, sequence that I saw some of on YouTube, and that looked really cool. It's like, why is this?
Right.
Why does the lion get to jump around and do stuff? This guy's doing really cool stuff.
Yeah. So there was later I think it was based on audiences' test reactions, but some discipline that was used in removing things that were not thematically cohesive. But the Munchkins managed to stay, and so did the Lions number at the end. And I don't think they're to the detriment of the movie. I think that there's enough visual interest. And I think the dramatic question during the Munchkin sequence about Dorothy, where she is, what she's going to do next, what the stakes are. Like, I think there are enough mysteries that keep me leaning forward through the Munchkin sequence that are then sort of diminished later on, where I'm like, I just want to get in to see the wizard. I'm not getting any new information from this lion thing, and it's really slowing the momentum. I think the Munchkin sequence does slow the narrative momentum to an extent, but because it's right at the break into 2, you get a little bit more extra buy-in from your audience, where our interest is going to be sustained through a longer musical number.
Totally.
Yeah.
Right. It's almost like the Munchkin sequence is the normal world of Act 2. It's the sort of like, okay, we're going to kind of hang out and see how these, but it's such a, like Michael said, it's such an assault that it's like, oh, hold on, is this what we're doing now? It's
the equivalent of like in The Matrix when Neo wakes up and he's just surrounded by people in tubes, and there's like the way he felt being attacked by all those machines and realizing he was in the real world.
Right. Ontological shock.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
It'd be like if Act 2 of The Godfather was Moulin Rouge. You'd be like, wait, what? What's happening right now? This is not what I was expecting to be happening.
To Trisha's point, it's like we are being introduced to the fact that we are now in this wild, upside down fantasy world. And so it does make sense to spend some time just having a fun, wacky musical number at that moment.
Right. But yeah, the word momentum that you said, Trisha, I think that's the thing about this movie. This movie is always, 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 with a few exceptions, moving forward. It's like, oh, they're already in Oz. Oh, they've already met this guy. Oh, they're already they're getting to the Emerald City. Like, they just always, that feeling when you watch a movie that you love and you're like, ooh, this scene. Ooh, they're going to do this. Ooh, we're getting to this point, right? And I feel like these sequences we're mentioning are the few exceptions to this movie where it's kind of like, oh, okay, because that's the other feeling you have when you see a movie that you know fairly well, where you're like, oh, okay, we've got to do homework for 10 minutes now until we get to the payoff afterwards, to tease the end of the season. I loved Enora, but the second act of that movie is kind of one idea for 40 minutes or something, and it's just like, I don't know why. And I'm excited to watch it again. I'm excited to talk about it. But in my mind, watching Enora for the second time, I'm already going, okay, I know I'm going to have that homework span between the things that I love about this movie, right? And I feel like that's what Wizard of Oz, because it's so good 90% of the time, it feels like that other 10% just kind of sticks out as like, you've got to wait now to get your dessert.
Something else I wrote down while watching it is just the physicality of the acting is so impressive. And I think there may be something about just, the era this came out in, the vaudeville, maybe roots of some of these actors, but just, I had forgotten how impressive the physicality, especially of, Scarecrow, really all of them, but Scarecrow and Tin Man, and just like physical comedy happening at the same time as a musical number, at the same time as really clever wit also. Like, I think you talked about the 4-quadrant feel of this movie, Trisha. It feels also kind of like the original kids movie, but also with wink winks for adults. Lots of really clever asides from Scarecrow, from these characters that would go over a kid's head, but are kind of like almost a nudge to the adults in the room of like, this is all kind of like ridiculous, isn't it? Or this is kind of a joke, or here's a sly comment about the situation we're in. And I really found, the acting and the kind of intelligence behind the acting choices was above what I was expecting. It didn't feel kind of like a generic, I don't know, like old movie acting or old movie feel of dance numbers. There was like a lot of effort being put into the physicality and the wit. That's just another pleasant surprise. And that's maybe another reason why it keeps holding up. There's something that doesn't feel totally outdated about the acting style. There's obviously the way people talk in Kansas, feels old, but there's also something kind of fresh and modern. There's like a twinkle in the eye of some of the actors that feels very modern and not old and fuddy-duddy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With the exception of The Wicked Witch, I would say. I think that to me, watching it this time, there was something about her performance that felt very like, what a world, you know, like there was something about it that just felt like it didn't have that zhuzh that you're talking about, that I feel like the main three companions and Dorothy herself and even the wizard, like there's something about all of their performances that feels exactly like what you're talking about. And there was something about the Wicked Witch where I was like, this doesn't feel quite right to me.
You mentioned the wizard, like one of the early moments in the movie where I felt that kind of modern wit was when she meets the fortune teller on the road, and he just switches out of his voice instantly once she leaves. And he's like, "Oh, poor kid. Hope she gets home."
Yeah.
It just there's something that feels so like kind of honest and great about that. You know, the whole thing was just him kind of playing a game with her. You know, being a nice guy to this lost kid.
The world of it's a very weird world. We'll talk about it in Wicked. It doesn't all make sense to me in my brain, and I want to talk about that and why at some point. But like as you're saying, the performances, the dancing, it's all, there's so much spectacle in this movie that still plays as spectacle today, which was surprising to me. And so, there was these great dance numbers, great performances. The Munchkins, it's a lot, but like they're performing, they have these costumes, the sets are amazing. And then just throughout the whole movie, like the sets are amazing and huge, and it doesn't look real, but it looks like, you know, a wonderful fantasy land. Like it looks exactly, it's capturing that. And then it has these amazing matte paintings, some really good special effects, like you were calling out, Trisha. Like, when the Wicked Witch appears and disappears, I was like, you can kind of see the trap door if you look really close. But otherwise, this is really cool. And like, even how they're doing some of the visual effects of like Glinda coming in with the little bubble. It's like goofy, but it's like, that's all right, 1939. Like, you go for it. So that was just another thing that seems to be part of the DNA also of this IP, I don't know, whatever we want to call it, but that there's this like imaginative, wonderful spectacle that activates the sort of childlike wonder. And it was cool to see the 1939 technology, artistry, like going all out and capturing that and having it still be effective, 80 years later. It's very impressive.
I'm going to object to your critique of the Wicked Witch's performance, Brian.
You think I didn't feel that way watching her?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. No, I think that because I know what you're talking about, but I feel like her like real world counterpart, Elvira Gulch, I guess is her name, really changes it for me. Elmira Gulch. I'm so sorry. Elmira Gulch. Margaret Hamilton is the actor.
She's like, that's really dark too. Like she's gonna steal this like dog.
She's gonna take the dog and have it destroyed.
The stakes are really high in that opening sequence. I'm like, this is really screwed up. I'm really on Dorothy's side. I'm terrified for this poor dog.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that character, Elmira Gulch character that she plays in the first 20 minutes of the movie is actually really grounded. I mean, in as much as anybody else is in the Kansas sequence, right? Like, I think she's playing it about as straight as any of the farmhands are, who turn out to be Dorothy's friends later in the Oz sequence. And I believe that there's like real animosity between her and Dorothy, and like within the story world, this version of Kansas, I think she feels pitch perfect. Like, I think she feels like a villain, but not like a huge cartoonish villain within that version of the story world. I think that if you want to roll with the dream logic of this is Dorothy's villain, then I don't think you need more nuance from that performance. Like, I like the bigness of it and the like, I'll get you my pretty, right? The whole thing, the screechiness of it, the like physicality of it. I think it all works because it's Dorothy's projection of this woman. And I buy that Margaret Hamilton is doing both things. Like, I buy that she understands that this is in the Kansas sequence, that this is a real human person in our world, or at least in the movie's version of our world, and that in the Oz sequence, this is not a real human person. This is just like a Wicked Witch villain, a green villain in this case. Like very, very far pushed into the fantasy realm, right? And so I think that you could probably argue that it's a real choice that's being made from the performance in that sequence. Also, I did have this thought. If I were reading the script today for coverage, being in no way exposed to this story world before, and not assuming I hadn't read the source material or that there was no source material, if someone literally handed me the script for The Wizard of Oz and I was going to read it for coverage, I would have some notes. And one of my notes would be, witch melted by water? Question mark, question mark, question
no
mark.
Setup.
Comes out of nowhere. Like, it's truly comes out of nowhere. There's not a line. There's absolutely nothing. It gives you nothing. And it's quite a choice for a finale for the death of who is a very menacing villain for most of the movie. It's boggling.
She's the alien from Signs.
Swing away, Dorothy. Swing away.
Swing away.
Wow. That is very puzzling that there's like absolutely no, and it happens on accident also, right? She's trying to put out somebody else and gets her wet. And yeah.
Dorothy has a lot of accidents in this movie that result in people dying. So it's like, you know.
You're right. Yeah, she kills multiple witches by accident.
She has the highest like body count, I feel like, out of everybody in this.
Dorothy's a monster.
Truly. Well, this is the
story
premise.
Of Wicked.
Yeah, this is the premise of Wicked. Stay tuned, everybody.
Something funny I did think while watching it this time as an adult was I was like, oh, now I know why Friends of Dorothy used to be the like code word for gay men, because I just felt like these are her gay friends, you know, like these guys are so gay. They're so queer coded in some ways. Like I just love how, you know, when the Tin Man starts doing his song, there's this like 1930s, you know, whatever that is, like version of gayness that I think I can see the gay community tagging onto. It's like Dorothy is your best friend. This is her group of misfits. They're all going to the wizard together. So it clicked for me. I was like, why Friends of Dorothy? Why Wizard of Oz? Why Dorothy? Why is that the thing? And I feel like I saw it this time, and it was really charming.
The lion is a bear. Oh my.
It's a dandelion too.
He really is.
Yeah.
I like went down a rabbit hole about that, Alex, after I watched it this time around, because I was like, I get it on an intuitive level, but I need someone like to explain to me like the historicity of the term, right?
I only got the intuitive thing, so I want to hear the facts.
I mean, like, you know, Google it, but like there's something about what you're saying, right? There's this kind of is a movie about chosen family,
Totally.
which is an idea, right, that sort of has really resonated in the gay community. Judy Garland herself is like, you know, sort of a gay icon, and this is her most well-known role. But yeah, it is interesting. It's not really in fashion now, and there are many other layers to it. But basically, like, the term doesn't start and end with this movie. There are many layers to the ideas presented here, but basically just that, yeah, these people take up together in a very wholesome, supportive way, right? Like in the way that you're describing. I think that it's impossible not to like that about this movie.
They're so supportive of each other. Like Dorothy is so sweet and kind-hearted and like wants to take in all these people and get them help with the wizard. There's a real sweetness at the core of the movie with these characters.
Yeah, Judy Garland's performance is amazing. Like, I just want to say that she is the person who sells everything that happens in this movie. And I look at it and it's, you know, it's kind of old Hollywood big in the way that we would think now it's too big. But there's so much warmth and emotionality to it, where it isn't just like a Disney princess quiver, or she's not playing it as a straight ingenue. There are layers to it where you get the feeling of like real fear and real hope, and like when she's going, oh, Annie M at the beginning. And she's so upset about Toto and all this stuff. And I don't know, she just brings so much vitality and just real dimensionality, earnestness, but
so
also something she brings more to it than is on the page. She makes Dorothy a real person, a young woman, but like just a person in and of herself that's trying to decide who she is and what she wants and all this stuff. And it's really lovely. Like everything, every interaction between her when she meets her friends and he's talking to them about what they want. To your point, Alex, is just like, she just immediately accepts them in a way that like is too quick also to a degree. But again, there's just this wholesomeness to her and her quest. And she just takes everybody for who they are in the very moment, like that they tell her what it is that they want. And she's like, well, you should come with us.
Which was like nice. Like it was nice to see a world where there was like no like duplicity or no like this is a fairy tale world inside the head of a child, and like it can be simple and people can be good and trust it. Like it was kind of just refreshing to like go into that fantasy world, and like we don't have a lot of that anymore, or like there's just so much more awareness of the unfortunate aspects of life that I feel like we have to kind of like hold with us even when we're in, 4-quadrant territory, etc.
Yeah, I was talking about this movie to Gen Z recently, a high schooler, and she was like, did not like the parts of this movie. She's like, Dorothy just like went into this like trailer with this random like fortune teller, and I was like, girl, no. And then like she just was immediately, like wandering around down in the yellow brick road with all these guys, and I was like, girl, all this stuff feels really foreign to us now and really troubling. And yeah, it was nice to kind of feel the earnestness of this again.
It was nice to go to Fantasyland where I didn't have to worry about those things.
Yep, nothing bad's going to happen to Dorothy. All these people are nice and they want to help her.
And to your point about her acting style, I think, or her performance, which is amazing, I feel like just like cinematic language style applies to acting too. And we've talked about that on the podcast of like acting has changed, and what we consider good acting is evolving all the time, just like cinematic language. But like at the end, it's like there's lots of different ways to pretend, but can you pretend in a way that makes me like emotionally like react? Are you communicating a thing? And lots of different styles can do that, and absolutely like she does it in this and just carries the whole, it's like the glue that holds this insanity really all together.
Mm-hmm. Truly.
Well, she's walking an interesting line where it's like, if you think about Jimmy Stewart from this age, he was like ahead of his time by 20 years of like, eventually people are going to be acting like they're not acting, but you're not used to that yet, but I'm going to do it anyway. Right. And then you have most of the performances from this era, which were very big and very like open your eyes really wide because the camera is there and I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeVille. Like what Gloria Swanson is doing in Sunset Boulevard is like on purpose a dated performance. Like in 1950, she's like, I'm going to give it like a 1930 performance, right? And I feel like I've never thought about it before, but Judy Garland is almost the midpoint between those two things, where she is doing these musical theater big kind of things, but she's doing it in a very naturalistic way that feels grounded even to us, 90 years later.
Cool. Well, why don't we go around and say what lessons we're going to take away from The Wizard of Oz? Alex, do you want to start us off?
Sure. We kind of hinted at it before with how extreme in the opening the situation is with the dog Toto. But I think just the character of the dog Toto is really important to the story. And just so much of the movie is driven by, and once again, Judy Garland, we're talking about the naturalism of her performance. When she's like holding Toto and like stroking Toto, she's like loving him a little too hard. I'm like, calm down, girl. You're gonna like crush him. But like she loves this dog, and she really has this deep connection with this dog and cares about him so much. It establishes her character as someone who kind of cares after these animals or misfits or whatever. But I think the way Toto is used throughout the movie is really smart. And it's just, I think without Toto there would be a missing element in this film. Like Toto is kind of her friend from the beginning, the things she cares about, the things she's protecting and wants to run away in order to protect. And Toto does come into the movie at these really key moments to save them or to reveal the wizard. And so just animal friends that are actually just animals and not talking lions. They do play this special role in these archetypal stories. These kind of innocence and the cleverness and the helpfulness of your animal friend. And so I think just thinking about Toto in this movie really helps us care about the situation, care about Dorothy's plight, and then also plays the role that kind of familiar for Dorothy, which is this kind of interesting archetypal thing that the movie does utilize. So Toto good. And man, speaking of Toto, like now I have 2 small dogs that are Toto sized, and there's that one really long shot where Dorothy's finishing the song Over the Rainbow, where she's kind of sitting on the tractor, and they made Toto just like go and sit up like in this very precarious seat. And you can tell like he's kind of antsy and like there's somebody telling him to like stay the whole time. So I really could not focus during the entire last part of that song. So I'm just watching this dog like try to keep it together, balancing on this little seat on a tractor. That's kind of funny.
Yeah, this is actually kind of related to my lesson. I really appreciate all the setup that the first act of this does. And we have kind of brushed over it, but even the fact that Dorothy lives with her aunt and uncle and not her parents, I feel like explains everything you need to know about why she has this connection with her pet, right? Like there's clearly something that has gone wrong in Dorothy's life. We don't know where her parents are. The movie doesn't tell us, but whatever it is, something is broken in her home life. Even though we see her aunt and uncle, they are there, right? Like we have no reason to suspect that they are like neglecting her or that there's something like deeply wrong in the home. And they do stand up for her sort of when her neighbor is coming to take her dog away. But we get the sense that like Dorothy does feel ignored by them. She comes in, they're like counting the chickens, literally. It's after they're hatched, but still. They're just really trying to like do this thing and they're not paying attention to what Dorothy is saying. They don't really care as much as she does about the fact that this dog is her best friend in the whole world and the neighbor is trying to take it away. And then she has sort of these, friendships with these farm hands, but like she's kind of alone and there is real dissatisfaction there, but without it being like this, she lives in an orphanage and her life is bad and everyone's like abusive toward her. It's not that, right? It's just that there are good things around her. She doesn't see them because she's so focused on the ways that she is dissatisfied or that there is trouble in her life. And in that sense, the movie is actually making the thematic conversation a little bit more relatable, right? Dorothy feels lonely, but not for like extreme reasons. She feels lonely for normal, relatable reasons, for reasons that we all can understand. And her best friend is a little dog and someone wants to take it away and hurt it. That's enough to make a young woman, a kid, really want to leave home. And there's also enough for her to want to come back to or learn to appreciate. And all of that is seeded into the first 20 minutes of the movie in a way that is, I think, very well done. And some of it's hammy, right? Where like, they're going to build a statue of me in this town. And you're like, well, okay. But it's all there, each one of Dorothy's like companions is only given one thing, but their one thing is in the movie, in the opening act. And then here's the wizard and here's his one thing, which is that he's a big fake. But that's all pays off in the end thematically. I also want to say that I desperately need to go back and study the scene where the Wizard of Oz gives them their stuff at the end, because it does seem like it very quickly moves on from the fact that all this is fake. Like he's like, here's a degree, it's fake. Here's a clock, also fake. Here's your medal, fake, very fake. And of
Have
course,
you run out of those nice shiny daggers?
Of course, the point is that they already had the thing that they wanted, right? Like, they already had, Scarecrow actually already is very smart. Tin Man already is very feeling and caring, and the Lion already is brave. Thematically, that's the point, but also the disappointment, I feel like, is just kind of moved past really quickly, or just the wizard is fake. Let's return to that when we talk about Wicked. But again, the setups are all there. The payoffs are all there. It's all very neat and thematically united. And I also don't find the first 20 minutes boring. My 3-year-old did, but I really didn't. I thought it was all incredibly fascinating. So
yeah, the part where the wizard gives them their prizes, that was one of the like most continuous moments of like winkiness to the adults in the room, where it's like, lots of people think without brains in their heads, like they have diplomas, just lots of, It was like one of those after another, which I really enjoyed as an adult. But yeah, it was funny how it almost served mostly as like a joke, and the reality of the world, as you're saying, Trisha, seemed to not be there anymore, which is, wait, you're not a real wizard. These are all fake things.
Yeah. And they're all just like, thank you so much.
Right. Well, it kind of, they're all playing a caricature of, kind of just, it's almost, there's a real micro satire of like all of American society jammed into like a really quick sequence of, we say diplomas make you smart, we say this makes you this, we say this makes you this, and they're all like, yes, that is what makes you this. But it's a little bit at odds, as you're saying, Trisha, with the other message, which is you don't need these things, you already have it. So it's a kind of a funny moment.
Yeah, I do feel like that ending and kind of everything with the wizard, like I feel deeply uncomfortable about the wizard, and I think maybe I'm supposed to, but like the movie also was sending me mixed signals, and I don't know, we'll talk about it in Wicked more, because I don't know. I have like deep-seated uncomfortable feelings about the wizard, and I need to do a sanity check with you guys later about.
Okay.
Even Jeff Goldblum?
Yeah, I mean, that helped clarify some of my thoughts, but like my memory of what the wizard was going to be when they got to him and then when he came out and all that stuff was very different than what happened. We'll talk about it in the Wicked episode, which you can listen to right now over on the Beyond Screenplay Patreon.
Right.
Well, the movie is called The Wizard of Oz, right? And the book has slightly different title, but essentially the same sentiment. It's not called Dorothy. It's not called Dorothy's Adventures in Oz. It's not called any of that. It's kind of focuses on the wizard. And of course, the wizard is a symbol. And the wizard as a symbol is pretty layered and upsetting. And this movie, again, simplifies it to an extreme degree, where it's just like the wizard is a MacGuffin, essentially. You're going to like spend the whole movie hunting down this thing only to discover you don't need to find that thing. In fact, that thing is going to leave in a balloon without you. And turns out the slippers you already had on your feet were the only thing you needed.
But you needed to find out for yourself.
Right.
Why is he leaving? How did he come from? I just have a lot of. I'm trying not to swear. I really do not like the wizard.
Wait, well, didn't he? I just figured his balloon also came from Kansas, and just the way that her house got pulled up in a tornado, he got sucked up into a vortex, and that's why he...
Yeah, but like, why is he leaving now? And like, everyone's just letting him go? Like, he's getting off scot-free from manipulating like an entire nation of people, like...
I'm curious how Wicked Part 2 deals with all that.
Right. I feel like because technically I've seen Wicked the play, I just don't remember anything, but I might be getting sense memories that are influencing this. So we'll unpack that.
No spoilers.
Yeah.
But yes, it's all set up in the first act. That's my lesson. The first act of Wizard of Oz is good.
Yeah. Word.
It is. It really is.
Brian, what's your lesson?
Yeah, it ties in a little bit with mine, which is I was just thinking about the characters in this movie, and I was like, that was like the first visceral reaction I had to thinking, oh, I'm going to watch The Wizard of Oz again for the first time in a little while. And I was just like, characters. Like my brain just said, they're look at that person and that person, these characters. And I was thinking like, what makes them so memorable? And I was like, well, okay, a movie like that, like a family movie / a fantasy movie, you can get away with the character. Like, this is literally an animal. This is literally an inanimate object. They literally need a brain. They literally need a heart, whatever, right? Like that is very easy to take something thematic or metaphorical and be like, no, we're going to literalize that and say that this is actually who this character is. But it made me think that there's something about that specificity and ability to recognize a character that we can actually bring into any genre of story. It's just more nuanced. You know, we talked about with Indiana Jones, how you can be like whip, fedora, fear of snakes, and be like, oh, Indiana Jones, right? And to be clear, I'm not talking about that like every annoying character in an 80s movie thing where they're like, he always has a lollipop, or, you know, he only talks in Monty Python reference or whatever, like that kind of just like pasted on, you know, limp in an eye patch type thing. Like, how is she going to remember them? I'm thinking about like Coen Brothers movies.
Mm-hmm. That was my first thought.
The supporting characters in those movies, you just always feel like here's a whole person who's got a whole story. Part of it's writing, part of it's directing, but big part of it's casting. Just here's someone you're going to remember, right? And then weirdly, I also thought about Die Hard, which is not a drama, but also not a fantasy movie, right? It's sort of somewhere in the middle where it's a realistic, or I should say it's set in our world, but it's a heightened, not realistic movie is a better way of putting it. But I was just like, you got John McClane, you got Hans Gruber, but then it's like the tech guy and the limo driver and Holly's like skeezy coworker and the scary blonde guy who's out for vengeance because he's got his like whole, his brother was killed thing, right? Reginald Vell Johnson, who's like the cowardly lion of that movie, who like has to, you know, and I was just like, there's so many kind of character mini archetypes in a movie like that. So it's like you look at Die Hard, you look at Coen Brothers, and it's like it's not that far off from A Wizard of Oz. It's just in a more nuanced way. And I feel like I've watched movies where 30 minutes into the movie, I'm like, that's two people. I thought I was watching one person for this entire movie. I did not realize those were two different characters, especially when you don't know the actors or whatever, right? Because they're just not well drawn enough. They're not unique enough. They don't have a thing. For whatever reason, The Wizard of Oz got me thinking about, you know, the characters in that movie are not just memorable because they're a lion, a scarecrow, and a tin man. It's like they all have their own desires. The movie dedicates time to be like, here's a new character. Here's their thing. Here's what they actually want. We're going to spend time with them. And then over the course of the movie, that thing of theirs is going to matter and is going to pay off at the end. You know, in Labyrinth, we talked about how Hoggle feels like that kind of character, but how the other characters don't. They just feel like they're there to be like, hi, I'm also on the team. Like, cool, let's keep going, you know? But like how that one character kind of has that full arc and that full like desire and everything pays off. So I feel like when you're writing any kind of script, think about The Wizard of Oz. Think about those characters that are big and be like, how in very small ways can I make my character have that as Trisha likes to put it, the "this is what I want" song, right? Like, but you like all of your characters can have a small version of that. It doesn't have to just be your protagonist.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of, thinking of these characters in other movies, when the scene where the scarecrow has like his stuffing falling out, just like, this is C-3PO, like 100%.
Oh, yeah.
There's so many C-3PO scenes, and then like the Tin Man eating oil, also C-3PO. It's just, there's so...
It's R2-D2, Alex. And then Chewie is the lion. Yeah. Speaking of Coen Brothers, Oh Brother Art Thou is doing a whole Wizard of Oz thing. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Also, earlier, Trisha, you said rabbit hole, go down a rabbit hole. And I was like, is that an Alice in Wonderland? Is that why we say that? And also, like, this feels like of the, you know, the line of Alice in Wonderland.
Definitely.
Well,
Also.
Baum was trying to write Alice in Wonderland, but what if theme?
Ah, well, nailed it.
There you go.
He did.
Yeah.
And he did do
He
that.
did it.
Like, what if actually there was plot? What if actually there was a character arc and some theme? What if American Alice in Wonderland, but story?
Well,
We did it.
That was good. Yeah, Bren, your lesson is kind of along the lines of what I have been thinking about, which is like when I'm watching something, I want to just like, let me know what the story is about. Let me know what the scene is about. Let me know what this person is about. And I think, as we've talked about many times before, there's like we've all seen when things are too big or go too far and are too on the nose, and that is a recognizable thing. And so it's like scary. And I feel like there's a natural inclination to run away from being too obvious or too big with the thing. And I think it's less obvious when things are too small and undetectable. And sometimes maybe even that's confused with like quality, or just like you didn't get it. You need to think harder about it. That means it's good. But kind of like to your point, Brian, like the elements that make these characters are like simple. Like there's so few things that are required for us to get what the Scarecrow is about, what the Tin Man is about, etc. But you get it, and it has meaning because those couple things are really well constructed and like work together and immediately convey the thing. And so part of me is just thinking like maybe it's better to start big, to start over the top, where you can easily recognize, are these big things doing what they need to do? And then once you feel confident in that, if you need to dress them up, make them more intricate, make them more complex, whatever it is, you can do that. But like, I think a fear of going too big means that we often don't do it at all. And so maybe starting big and like giving yourself the permission to do the children's story version of your story even might help you see more clearly all the elements, because if they don't work there, then they're not going to work when you put a bunch of crap on top of it either. It's just going to be harder.
Really good idea.
Get to.
Yeah.
If I've said it once, I've said it 100 times. Movies, feature films are such a short, bite-sized amount of an audience's time. They need to be simplified. Simplify it, pare it down, boil it down, make it clear. Like, I just don't feel like that's the mission these days. Everyone wants it messier, and actually nobody wants it messier. Neaten it up. That's what The Wizard of Oz is about. Like these, I mean, the story form is lending itself to these types of classical storytelling because it is so short. That's why short stories are the best like translation to feature films, and children's literature are also excellent translations to feature films because they are by nature simple. And I can't stress it enough.
Yeah. Yeah, the other morning I was in the theater watching The Brutalist, and later that afternoon when I was still watching it, I was like, this is long. I don't know if you needed all this for that. So stay tuned for that conversation.
And like, you know, obviously you have to keep the pace up, keep it evolving. Like we talked about the lion scene where it's like, it starts to drag because it's not evolving, it's not moving along. But again, if you know what those things are, then it's easier for you to make sure that characters are evolving, plots moving forward, or different characters having moments. So like track those things, know what's happening, and then dress it up and make it cool, but know what it is and keep it moving. Cool. I want to talk about Wicked, but we're going to do that tomorrow. But you listener, you have that waiting for you right now over on the Beyond the Screenplay Patreon. There's this weird time travel thing happening where you could know what I think before they know what I think.
Maybe you've already listened to the Wicked episode.
Whoa.
How did we do?
Yeah. Let us know how we did before you listen to the after of the now. As a reminder, next week we're going to be talking about Sicario, the Denis Villeneuve film. Everyone's really excited about talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked when it was about the one character until it was like, but what if it wasn't anymore? It's the whole thing.
Excited to revisit it.
Yeah, as I was telling everyone before I got on mic, I tried to watch it. And the last time I tried to watch it, the fire started in LA. And then a couple of days passed, then I tried to finish it, and then more fires started. So I'm pretty worried about finishing it.
Be careful, Michael.
Yeah.
While finishing
Maybe
this
just
movie.
don't finish it. I don't know. Yeah.
It might be the safest bet. I don't know.
Go on a boat and it's just
And it becomes Titanic. Speaking of watching things, what else have you guys been watching recently? Trisha, what have you been watching recently?
I took my whole family to see Moana 2 in the movie theater. And it is not in the movie theater any longer. By the way, you can just watch it on your Disney Plus if you are the kind of person inclined to watch Moana 2. And I have some notes I really enjoyed the experience of watching it. We went down and saw it at the El Capitan here in LA, and it's just magical, right? It's an old movie house, and it's the one where all the Disney movies make their premieres. They do like a fun stage show beforehand where like the real Moana comes out in a costume and dances, and it's really lovely. Like it's just a wonderful experience to get to go down there, especially with kids who are gonna love a movie no matter what it is, because they're just so excited about seeing their favorite characters again. In the experience of watching it, I was like, okay, I'm having a good time, like, and it's not boring. And then when I stopped and was thinking back over it, I was just like, what? None of you have seen it, so none of you can relate to my feelings, but parents or other folks out there who have seen Moana 2, let's chat. Movies like this take up so much space in my brain, and I can't. There's so much to say. There's so much to say about what it is, what happened, why it works, why it doesn't at all work in any way. It's a film you can stream. Moana 2. It's on your Disney Plus.
Meet Trisha on Discord.
Meet me, please, please. Especially if you've seen it as many times as I have now. That was the first time I saw it, the one at the El Capitan. I've seen it so many times since then.
Well, seems like it's a whole thing. I mean, it must be great. It made $1 billion.
Yep, that's the measure of how we know movies are good or not.
Brian, what have you been watching recently?
Well, speaking of family movies that make a lot of money, and also speaking of witches and wizards, the last 3 days of 2024, my partner and I engaged in a at-home Harry Potter marathon, which was a delight. We made butterbeer, and I invented a rum and tequila cocktail called Expecto Patron rum.
Nice.
Yep.
Nice.
And we got the Bertie Bott's every flavored beans and the jelly slugs. It was a whole experience. And yeah, you know, I mean, just the experience of watching all the movies together is so interesting, because it's like the first two books are simpler stories, and Chris Columbus brings this like family movie kind of feel to them. And then Azkaban and Goblet of Fire, when like, what if we told the stories that were a little darker and longer and straight? And then you bring in these other two directors who are kind of doing their own thing. And then the weird thing that happens when you're done watching Goblet of Fire, you're like, wow, we did it. There's one movie left, right? And it's like, no, there's 4 more movies. They're just all one big story. It almost feels like a limited series after that point, right? And then that's when like David Yates takes over, and he is the director for that sequence of events, right? And so I think it's really interesting how the different filmmakers, and even just like the ability of the young actors, is like improving and changing along the way, you know? So it really does pay off to watch them all together, because you feel those shifts. Also, we donated $25 per movie to the Transgender Law Center, which fights for safety and freedom for trans and gender nonconforming people. So I highly recommend doing that as well, if you're inclined to do so.
You can do that without watching the movies too.
That's true.
You can just donate also. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a time in our lives where maybe that feels like a good thing to do. So that's my report.
That's nice. That's a win-win. I like it. Yeah, all the Harry Potter movies have like colors in my brain, and they like follow those blocks of like the color palette is like warm,
Order of
and
Phoenix is blue, right?
Cooler.
Well, cover.
Azkaban's blue, and then blue, and then everything is gray from Order of Phoenix on is like the slight problem, I think.
Yeah. Half-Blood Prince, I really like the cinematography in Half-Blood Prince.
I like them all, but they blend together quite a bit. Yeah.
Half-Blood Prince is very pretty though. Yeah. Cool. Okay, Alex, what have you been watching?
So the other night, I wandered into the living room, and my husband had just started the movie, and it was Aaron Brockovich. And I don't know why he started that movie. Maybe it's on Netflix right now. Maybe basically he just started playing Aaron Brockovich randomly. And I was like, oh yeah, I haven't seen this movie for so many years. Is it good? Do I like it? I sat down. I love this movie. Aaron Brockovich is really freaking good. Why have we not talked about Aaron Brockovich? It's so good. Julia Roberts, so good. Albert Finney, so good. Yeah, we need to talk about Aaron Brockovich, is my report from watching Aaron Brockovich recently.
I'm down.
Brockovich.
Brockovich.
Also, PSA, David Koepp and Steven Soderbergh have a movie coming out this month called Presence, and another movie coming out in March called Black Bag. That's like a Michael Fassbender, Cate Blanchett, Mr. and Mrs. Smith story. So apparently those guys have been up to some stuff together. So I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, yes.
But yeah, Aaron Brockovich is just like, it's just all my favorite things about Soderbergh as a director are here. And then just the writing is so good. And all the actors are there to play. And even the supporting cast feels like a Coen Brothers supporting cast, just like very real feeling people, great character actors. Yeah, it's really good. So
Nice. It's been
Aaron Brockovich, go
a
watch.
long time for me. Yeah.
Nice.
I feel like not since renting it at Blockbuster,
Right.
maybe have I seen that movie.
Yeah, that and Traffic. I feel like I saw them when they were when you saw them, and then that was it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Nice. Well, over the break for Christmas, I decided to watch The Holdovers.
Oh, nice.
And I loved it to death. It was so wonderful and charming, and just like it was just like a movie, and it tells its story. It's everything we've been talking about. It's a simple story, but it's very affecting. You could go on a journey. It has a nice sense of place. The actors are great. And I remember seeing the trailer and being like, why does it look like this? Like they're like the marketing was weird, where it's like
I didn't see the movie because of the trailer. Like I probably would have seen the movie by word of mouth, but the trailer and its like style was so off-putting to me. I was like, I will not see this movie.
Yeah, like same. And it's like going for the like it looks and feels like the era that it's from, which the movie does also, but it's wonderful in the movie. For some reason, how it was packaged in the trailer like just sent the wrong signal
like
to me.
Freeze framing on Paul Giamatti's face going, ah, like at the end.
Right.
Yeah, it's like it was very like kind of wacky feeling. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I feel like it played in front of everything. Like I saw the trailer in theaters
Right.
like
it
7
played
times.
for every movie for like 2 months. Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, I watched the whole, and it was amazing. It's like one of my favorite movies that I've seen recently. So highly recommend. And it's a nice, fun, like Christmas story movie also, but just like delightful start to finish.
2 quick thoughts. One of which is I watched Heretic the other night, and that movie, and also Enora. Been going to the Alamo Drafthouse a lot, and you see the trailers over and over again. And like those are movies where I'm like watching the first act of the movie, being like, yeah, this trailer was just like, this is exactly what this movie is, up until the point in which we're not going to tell you after that. Holdovers, I agree. I loved it. But yeah, the trailer did have this like weird, goofy energy to it that the movie doesn't itself have. But yeah, when I talked about that I love, Hal Ashby, like a Harold Maude and it being there and everything. And it was like really interesting to see Alexander Payne going for this exact style, but pulling it off so well that I was just like, okay, yeah, I'm on board. Do it. So I'm glad that Michael of a year and a half ago has accepted that like this is a real movie and it's actually good.
Finally came around. But yeah, that feeling that you get that like hurts in your throat, where you're like you want to like you're just feeling the emotion and you're just like you're feeling it. I had that multiple times in the movie.
Oh, that's awesome.
Like, this is great.
The fact that Michael feels this way about a movie that looked like that in the trailer is blowing my mind. I guess I got to watch it.
Yeah,
it's really good.
It's my new annual holiday tradition movie.
Oh,
I like it. I'm going to do that too. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, this has been our conversation about The Wizard of Oz. We're going to talk about Wicked tomorrow, but you can listen to that today over at the Beyond Screenplay Patreon. That is our Patreon exclusive episode. Next week, we'll be back to talk about Sicario and kicking off our Wicked winter. Very excited. There's going to be some interesting conversations ahead. You guys have seen all the new movies and it's hard to read from your reactions exactly how you feel, but we're going to talk about Challengers on Valentine's Day, so everything's fine.
It's a very interesting year for movies and Oscars, so it's good stuff.
Yeah.
Certainly is.
Yes. We want to say a big thank you, as always, to the patrons that make this show possible. Thank you to our producer, Vince Major. Thank you to our editor, Mike Wuerth, and the whole Nebula Studios team. I'm Michael Tucker, and I've been joined today by Trisha Rand, Brian Bittner, and Alex Cayeros. Head over to the Beyond the Screenplay Patreon, and then you can get access to our Discord, and then we can talk to you about all this on the Beyond the Screenplay Discord. So go do that, and we'll see you in the next episode for Sicario or Wicked, if you're going to go listen to Wicked right now.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.